Okay, guys, next is 34.4, fertilization and development. So if you think about it, there's not really anything any more remarkable than the formation of a new human being from a single cell. So we're going to look at how do these cells arrange themselves into the tissues and organs of the body. How does an individual cell know to become an embryonic skin, heart, or blood cell? And there are some of the most important questions in all of biology, and we are beginning to learn the answers. So, what takes place during fertilization in the early stages of human development? Well, the fusion of a sperm and an egg cell is called fertilization. The key events in the development include gastrulation, which produces the 3 cell layers of the embryo, and neurulation, which leads to the formation of the nervous system. So a sperm and an egg must meet so the two gametes can form a single cell. And the fusion of a sperm cell and an egg cell is called fertilization. So during sexual intercourse, sperm are released when the semen is ejaculated through the penis into the vagina. And semen is generally released just below the cervix, the opening that connects the vagina to the uterus. Sperm swim actively through the uterus to the fallopian tubes. If an egg is present in one of the fallopian tubes, its chances of being fertilized are good. The egg is surrounded by a protective layer that contains binding sites to which sperm can attach. The sperm head releases powerful enzymes that break down the protective layer of the egg. The haploid sperm nucleus enters the haploid egg. The chromosomes from the sperm and the egg are brought together to form a single diploid nucleus containing a set of chromosomes from each parent cell. The fertilized egg is called a zygote. At this point, the developing human can also be called an embryo. When a sperm enters the egg releases a material that coats its surface. The coating forms a barrier that prevents other sperm from attaching to and entering the egg. This phenomenon was discovered by cell biologist Ernest Everett. Okay, multiple embryos. If 2 eggs are released during the same menstrual cycle and each is fertilized, fraternal twins may result. Fraternal twins are not identical in appearance and may even be different sexes because each has been formed by the fusion of a different sperm and a different egg. So sometimes a single zygote splits apart and produces 2 genetically identical embryos. These 2 embryos are called identical twins because they are the result of the same fertilized egg. Identical twins are always the same sex. Okay, implantation. While still in the fallopian tube, the zygote begins to undergo mitosis. And as the embryo grows, a cavity forms in the center until the embryo becomes a hollow ball of cells known as a blastocyst. After 6 or 7 days after fertilization, the blastocyst attaches to the wall of the uterus and begins to grow into the tissues of the mother. This process is known as implantation. So after implantation, cells in the blastocyst begin to specialize or differentiate, resulting in the development of the various types of tissues in the body. So a cluster of cells known as the inner cell mass develops within the inner cavity of the blastocyst. The body of the embryo will develop from these cells, while the other cells of the blastocyst will differentiate into some of the tissues that support and protect the embryo. The result of gastrulation is the formation of 3 cell layers called the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. The ectoderm and endoderm form first. The mesoderm is produced by a process of migration. You've got a really good picture in your book that shows all these different levels on here. So I want you to be sure and look at that. So the ectoderm will develop into the skin and the nervous system. The mesoderm cells develop and form many of the body's internal structures, including bones, muscles, blood cells, and gonads. The endoderm forms the linings of the organs in the digestive system, such as the stomach and the intestines, as well as the respiratory and the excretory system. And remember, on the ecto, meso, and endo, we already know how to use those words by definition. Neurulation is the first step in the development of the nervous system. So shortly after the gastrulation is complete, a block of mesodermal tissue begins to differentiate into the notochord. And as the notochord develops, the ectoderm near the notochord thickens and forms the neural plate. The raised edges of the neural plate form neural folds and the neural crest. The neural folds gradually move together and form the neural tube, from which the spinal cord and the brain will develop. The cells of the neural crest migrate to other locations and become types of nerve cells, skin pigment cells, and other structures such as the lower jaw. If the neural tube does not close completely, a serious birth defect known as spina bifida can result. So studies show that folic acid, also known as vitamin B9, can prevent most cases of spina bifida. Because neurulation usually occurs before a woman is aware of pregnancy, folic acid is an important nutrient in any woman's diet. So the embryo is surrounded by amnion, which is a sac filled with amniotic fluid that cushions and protects the developing embryo. Another sac, known as the chorion, forms just outside the amnion. This makes direct contact with the tissue of the uterus. And there's another diagram in your book that shows all of this. Near the end of the 3rd week of development, small finger-like projections called the villi form on the outer surface and extend into the uterine lining. And this is when a vital organ called the placenta is formed. It's the connection between the mother and the embryo that acts as the embryo's organ of respiration, nourishment, and excretion. So across the placenta, oxygen and nutrients diffuse from the mother's blood to the embryo's blood. Carbon dioxide and metabolic waste diffuse from the embryo's blood to the mother's blood. And the blood of the mother and that of the embryo flow past each other, but they do not mix. The exchange of gases and other substances occurs in the chorionic villi. The umbilical cord, which contains 2 arteries and 1 vein, connects the embryo to the placenta. And after 8 weeks of development, the embryo is called a fetus. By the end of 3 months, most of the major organs and tissues are fully formed. The muscular system is well developed. The fetus may begin to move and show signs of reflexes. And the fetus is about 8 centimeters long and has a mass of about 28 grams. So, what important events occur during the later stages of human development? Well, during the 4th, 5th, and 6th months after fertilization, the tissues of the fetus become more complex and specialized, and they begin to function. During the last 3 months before birth, the organ systems of the fetus mature, and the fetus grows in size and mass. So the fetal heart becomes large enough so that it can be heard with a stethoscope. We're talking in the 4 to 6 month range here. The bone continues to replace the cartilage that forms the early skeleton, and a layer of soft hair grows over the skin of the fetus, and the mother begins to feel the fetus moving. From 7 to 9 months, the fetus doubles in mass. The lungs and other organs undergo a series of changes that prepare them for life outside the uterus, and the fetus is now able to regulate its body temperature. The central nervous system and the lungs complete their development. So, on average, it takes 9 months for a fetus to fully develop. And babies born before 8 months of development are called premature babies. And they often have severe breathing problems because of incomplete lung development. A complex set of factors triggers the birth process. One of these factors is the release of the hormone oxytocin from the mother's posterior pituitary gland. So oxytocin affects a group of large involuntary muscles in the uterine wall. And as these muscles are stimulated, they begin a series of rhythmic contractions, which is known as labor. As labor progresses, the contractions become more frequent and more powerful. The opening of the cervix expands until it is large enough for the head of the baby to pass through. At some point, the amniotic sac breaks and the fluid it contains rushes out of the vagina. Contractions of the uterus force the baby, usually head first, out through the vagina. And as the baby meets the outside world, he or she may begin to cough or cry, a process that rids the lungs of fluids. Breathing starts almost immediately, and the blood supply to the placenta dries up. The umbilical cord is clamped and cut, leaving a small piece attached to the baby that will soon dry and fall off, leaving a scar known as the navel or the belly button. In a final series of uterine contractions, the placenta and the empty amniotic sac are expelled from the uterus as the afterbirth. Within a few hours after birth, the pituitary hormone prolactin stimulates the production of milk in the mother's breast. The nutrients present in that milk contain everything the baby needs for growth and development during the first few months of life. So, although the placenta acts as a barrier to many harmful or disease-carrying agents, some do pass through this barrier and affect the life of the embryo. So the virus that causes AIDS can infect the developing fetus, and the virus responsible for German measles can cause birth defects. That virus is called rubella. Alcohol can permanently injure the nervous system, and drugs such as heroin and cocaine can cause drug addiction in newborn babies. Smoking during pregnancy can double the risk of low weight at birth, leading to other severe health problems for the baby. So from 1970 to 2000, the infant mortality rate in the United States decreased by about 65%. Many factors contributed to this decrease. So, for example, in 1933, the U.S. Public Health Service recommended that women consume 4 milligrams of folic acid per day, and between 1996 and 1998, manufacturers of enriched grain products began to add folic acid to the products, which affected the incidence of spina bifida. So by adding these nutrients into just the normal foods, they help to deter that. Okay, next section.